My name is Clare Richardson, and I'm sitting in my small apartment in Boston, trying to piece together how everything fell apart. If someone had told me 5 years ago that my own children would turn their backs on me, I would have laughed. But life doesn't warn you when the people you love most begin to drift away, or worse, push you out. For most of my adult life, I believed family meant unconditional love, that we'd always be there for one another, no matter what. When my son Daniel and my daughter Sarah bought their house together in Denver, I knew it would be a stretch for them financially. They were both starting families of their own, juggling bills, jobs, and everything in between. So I stepped in. I paid off their mortgage, every last cent. It wasn't just a gesture, it was my heart on paper. I even put the house under my name to help them secure a better rate. I didn't ask for anything in return. I didn't want credit. I only wanted to see them happy, stable, supported. I thought it would bring us closer, that maybe they'd feel how much I loved them, not in words, but in action. But that illusion shattered the day Daniel looked me in the eye and said, "We don't need you anymore." Just like that. No gratitude, no warmth, just distance. Cold, deliberate distance. I stood there in the living room I helped pay for, surrounded by furniture I had quietly contributed to, and felt dismissed, like I was a burden, a relic from a past they no longer wanted. The pain was sharp, immediate, like something inside me broke, and I didn't know how to fix it. For nights afterward, I lay awake, thinking back to the times I cradled Sarah through fevers, or drove Daniel to soccer practices with a thermos of hot cocoa in the winter. I remembered birthday parties I planned, hospital visits, late-night phone calls where they cried, and I listened. And now I was disposable? That one sentence, "We don't need you anymore," echoed in my head like a cruel anthem. Something in me hardened. I wasn't angry at first. I was wounded in a way that doesn't scab over quickly. And in that pain, I made a decision. I transferred the title of the house, my house, to my sister Claire's name. She's always been the one person I could trust. She lives here in Boston and she understood, even before I spoke a word. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was the only thing I had left to protect myself. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance, safety, a way to stop bleeding. But the question still haunts me. Did I help them out of love, or out of fear of being forgotten? The days after I transferred the deed were quiet, unnaturally quiet. Daniel and Sarah didn't call. They didn't even seem to notice the change, at least not at first. Or maybe they did, and chose silence over confrontation. Either way, the void grew louder each day. I would sit at my kitchen table staring at my phone, wondering if they'd say something. I had imagined a dozen scenarios, some angry, some tearful, some full of regret. But reality gave me nothing. No texts, no calls, just silence. I started questioning myself. Had I overreacted? Was I too sensitive? Maybe I misunderstood Daniel's tone. Maybe "we don't need you anymore" was just poorly worded, taken out of context. But the truth is, even if the words had come out differently, the meaning would have stayed the same. The door had closed. They'd closed it. It wasn't just about the money. It never was. It was about being discarded, as if my only value was financial, as if the moment my role as the provider ended, so did my place in their lives. I felt like a coat someone wears in winter and tosses in a closet come spring. I called Claire a few days after the transfer. She's the type of person who doesn't say much, but when she does, you listen. I told her everything, every word, every tear, every moment I felt myself being erased. She listened without interrupting, and then she said, "Claire, they didn't deserve what you gave them, but you still gave it. That says something about you, not them." That hit hard. Still, I couldn't stop replaying the past in my mind. The birthday Sarah forgot last year. The missed Thanksgiving invitation. The time Daniel cancelled our coffee last minute and never rescheduled. It was all there, adding up quietly over the years. I just didn't want to see it. The transfer to Claire's name wasn't revenge. It was clarity. It was me taking back something that had turned into a symbol of my own erasure. I wanted them to feel, even just for a moment, the consequences of pushing someone away who only ever wanted to love them. But they didn't react. Not immediately. And that silence. It was almost worse than any outburst. I started having dreams, not vivid but heavy. Dreams where I wandered through their house and no one could see me. I'd reach out to touch Sarah's shoulder and my hand would pass through her like smoke. I'd speak to Daniel and he'd walk right past me. I'd wake up with a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. I wasn't just grieving a relationship. I was grieving the mother I thought I was, the one who mattered, the one who was needed. And I didn't know if she still existed. It's strange how pain wakes up memories you thought were long buried. After the silence stretched into weeks, I found myself drifting through old photo albums one rainy evening. Not the digital kind, real ones, with crinkled pages and handwritten dates in the corners. I turned each page slowly, like I was peeling open wounds I hadn't realized were still bleeding. There was Sarah, age 7, grinning with frosting on her nose from the birthday cake I stayed up all night baking. Daniel, 10, holding my hand after his first piano recital, his eyes wide with nervous pride. In every photo, I was there, right beside them, laughing, cheering, holding. I whispered to the pictures as if they could answer, when did I stop being enough? It wasn't like we never fought. Raising 2 kids alone after their father left was never easy. There were slammed doors and angry words, but there was also forgiveness. Always forgiveness. Or at least I thought so. The more I flipped through the album, the more I realized I'd been chasing their approval for years, not just as a mother, but as a person. After the divorce, I tried to be everything: provider, nurturer, protector. I worked double shifts, sold my wedding ring, skipped meals. I made it work because I believed love would make it worth it. Now I wonder if they ever saw me beyond what I gave them. Claire came over a few days later. She brought a casserole and a quiet kind of comfort only sisters can give. We sat on my porch while the sky turned pink with the fading light. She didn't ask questions. She didn't press. She just said, "You're allowed to feel this. You don't have to justify your hurt." I nodded, but I didn't speak. I couldn't. Not yet. That night I got a text from Sarah. Just one sentence. "Did you transfer the house to Aunt Claire?" No greeting, no warmth, just confrontation. I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have words, but because the only words I had were too raw, too full of ache to send through a glowing rectangle. Instead, I opened the bedroom drawer where I keep the deed confirmation. I ran my fingers across Claire's name. It felt final, like a line had been drawn in the sand, and I had stepped back. I didn't regret helping them. I regretted believing it would bring us closer. And somewhere deep inside, I began to wonder if they only loved me for what I gave. Did they ever truly love me at all? A week passed after Sarah's message. I didn't respond, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I knew whatever conversation might come would hurt, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to bleed again. Then, one Thursday afternoon, the phone rang. It was Daniel. I froze. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something, maybe habit, maybe hope, made me answer. "Hi, Mum." His voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that hides tension just beneath the surface. I swallowed hard. "Hi, Daniel." There was a pause. Then, "Why did you do it?" I didn't pretend not to understand. I sat down on the edge of the couch, steadying my voice. "Because I needed to protect myself." "From what?" he asked. "From your own kids?" That hit like a slap. The irony was cruel. "No," I said softly. "From the feeling that I didn't matter once the money was gone." His voice grew sharper. "So this is punishment? Some sort of lesson you think we need to learn?" I closed my eyes. "It's not punishment. It's clarity. I gave everything I had, Daniel. Not just money. My time, my years, my heart. And you told me you didn't need me anymore. Do you know how that felt?" He was silent. I waited, hoping for even a hint of remorse. But when he finally spoke, his tone was colder than before. "You should have talked to us, not gone behind our backs." I felt a heat rise in my chest. "Talk to you? When? Before or after you made it clear I was no longer part of your life?" The line went quiet again. I could hear him breathing and I knew he was angry, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I was speaking without apology. "I didn't transfer the house to hurt you," I said. "I did it because I needed to remind myself that I wasn't just a wallet with legs, that I deserved to be seen." His reply came after a long beat. "Well, now we see you, loud and clear." Then he hung up. I sat there, staring at the screen, the dial tone echoing like a funeral bell. There it was, the confirmation of everything I'd feared. I wasn't their mother anymore, not in their eyes. I was a resource, an asset, and now that I'd drawn a line, I was expendable. That night, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't in pain, but because the pain had turned into something else. Resolve, quiet, heavy, but solid. Claire called later, sensing something in my voice. I told her what happened, and she didn't say much, just, "I'm proud of you." Funny. No one had said that to me in years. I hung up and sat in the dark, realizing something painful and liberating all at once. Sometimes the people you raise grow up to be strangers. There's a kind of grief that doesn't announce itself with sobbing or screaming. It creeps in slowly, like fog over a field, dulling everything in its path. That's what I lived with in the weeks that followed Daniel's call. A quiet, relentless ache. Not sharp, just constant. I stopped checking my phone for messages, stopped imagining what it might feel like to reconcile. I didn't delete their numbers, but I stopped hovering over them, waiting for something, anything, that resembled love. And maybe the hardest part was accepting that I no longer hoped. I spent more time in my garden. Not because I found peace in it, but because pulling weeds and pruning roses gave my hands something to do while my heart withered. It was easier to focus on the thorns outside than the ones buried deep inside me. One afternoon, while planting daffodils, Claire showed up unannounced. She always had a knack for knowing when I needed company, even when I didn't ask. She brought lemon tea and an old box of letters from when we were teenagers. We sat on the porch, leafing through them like archaeologists of our own lives. Letters from summer camp, scribbled birthday notes, even one where I'd written about Sarah's birth, my excitement, my fear, my promise to always protect her. I read that letter aloud, barely able to finish. "She was so tiny," I whispered, and I remember thinking, "This is the best thing I'll ever do." Claire didn't interrupt. She just placed her hand on mine. "She still is," she said. "You still did something beautiful. That doesn't change because she forgot how to see it." Those words stuck with me long after she left. I repeated them in my mind like a mantra. You still did something beautiful. Still, the pain lingered. I hadn't heard from Sarah since the text. Not a word. That silence said more than any insult ever could. It was apathy, distance, a void where a daughter's love should have been. I started therapy. I needed someone to speak to, someone who wasn't family, who wouldn't just say you're right or they'll come around. I needed truth, even if it hurt. The therapist, a gentle woman named Laura, asked me a question that took my breath away. "Claire, what if they never come back? What will you do with that part of you that still loves them?" I didn't answer that day. I couldn't. Because I didn't know. What do you do with all the love you stored for people who no longer see you? You don't throw it away, you carry it. But you carry it differently. Maybe not as a gift anymore. Maybe as a scar. 3 weeks after the phone call with Daniel, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name written in Sarah's handwriting, curled and neat, like she used to sign her school permission slips. I stood frozen on the porch, envelope in hand, my thumb tracing the edge of the paper. I didn't open it right away. Something about its weight felt too heavy, too final. I carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen counter, where it sat for 2 full days, untouched. What was I afraid of? The truth? A goodbye? Or worse, an apology so hollow it would feel like mockery? On the 3rd day, I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat at the table, and opened it. The first line was cold. "I don't know why you're trying to hurt us." I read the rest through a blur of disappointment. It wasn't a letter of reconciliation. It was a list of grievances, a calculated attempt to make me feel like the villain, that I had embarrassed them, disrespected their independence, taken control of something that was never mine to begin with. Never mine. I paid the mortgage. I carried that debt so they could raise their children without drowning. And yet, here it was, in ink, proof that all of it had been rewritten in their minds. Sarah ended the letter with, "Maybe it's time you let go of needing to be the center of everything." I didn't cry. I laughed. Quietly, bitterly, the kind of laugh that comes when sorrow boils down to ash. They really believed this was about control, as if I ever wanted to hold power over them, as if I didn't spend years letting them take and take without ever asking for anything in return. That afternoon, I sat in therapy and read the letter aloud to Laura. When I finished, she said something that stuck with me. People rewrite stories to protect their guilt, but that doesn't mean your truth stops being true. I took the letter home, folded it once more, and placed it in a drawer, not out of spite, but out of closure. It had said all it needed to say, and so had I in my silence. The next day, Claire called, sensing again that something had shifted. I told her about the letter. Her voice tightened. "You don't deserve this," she said. "You deserve to be held the way you held them." I looked out the window past the fading fall leaves and whispered, maybe that was never going to come from them. That night, I pulled out an old journal, the kind I hadn't touched in years. I started writing, not to them but to myself. Not a record of pain, but a promise that no matter how they chose to remember me, I would remember the truth. I was a good mother, even if they forgot, even if they chose not to see. The journal became a nightly ritual. I'd light a candle in the kitchen, pour a small glass of red wine and write, not for anyone else, just me. Some nights I'd remember small, ordinary things, packing lunchboxes, sewing Halloween costumes, singing softly when Sarah had night terrors. Other nights I'd write about the silence, the ache, the betrayal. There was something sacred about giving voice to memories they had discarded. It felt like reclaiming my motherhood, one page at a time. But memories don't fill the space left by the living. One Saturday morning I went to the farmer's market alone. I saw a little boy sitting on his dad's shoulders, pointing excitedly at a balloon vendor. The father laughed and spun him in a circle. For a second I couldn't breathe. It reminded me of Daniel when he was 5 at a county fair. He had wanted a red balloon more than anything, and when the string snapped and it floated away, he cried like the world had ended. I had bought him another one, then carried him on my shoulders until he was laughing again. Now I wondered, did he remember that day? Did any of it mean anything to him now? I left the market early. The sight of families was too much. Back home, I tried calling an old friend from work, Janine. We hadn't spoken in months. She had always been the one to bring coffee to my desk and listen when motherhood felt like a storm I couldn't contain. When she answered, her voice was warm, like stepping into a house that still smelled like cinnamon. We talked for an hour, about nothing and everything. I didn't mention Daniel or Sarah, not directly, but Janine knew. She asked if I'd consider writing them a letter, a real one, with no expectations, just my truth. I told her I didn't know if I could. Not after Sarah's last letter. She said, maybe it's not about them anymore. Maybe it's about freeing the weight from your own chest. That night I sat at my desk and stared at a blank sheet of paper. I thought about writing Dear Sarah, but my hand froze. Instead I wrote, to the people I once held in my arms and still carry in my heart. And I began. I wrote about the nights I stayed up worrying, the dreams I had for them, the fear that maybe I'd loved them too hard, too fully, to the point where they never had to love me back. I didn't ask for anything, not forgiveness, not change. Just that they remember I was once their home. By the time I finished, the candle had burned low and my hand was sore. I folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it in the same drawer where Sarah's had gone. Not to send, just to know it existed. Because sometimes healing isn't found in confrontation. Sometimes it's found in giving yourself the final word. It was late October when Claire knocked on my door with that look on her face, the one that meant, I have news and you're not going to like it. She stepped in without waiting for an invitation. and placed her coat on the chair. "Daniel's wife called me," she said, before I even had time to offer tea. I froze. Claire sat down. Her voice was calm, but I could feel the tension in it. "They're talking about taking legal action, contesting the transfer, saying you acted irrationally, that you're unwell." My heart thudded, not out of fear, but rage. "Unwell?" I said. "For protecting myself?" Claire nodded. "I told them you're of sound mind and that you were more generous than most people would ever be. But they're angry, Claire, embarrassed, and they're trying to regain control." Control. That word again, as if this had ever been about power. I laughed bitterly. "They ignored me, insulted me, pushed me away, and now they want to frame this as instability." Claire reached across the table. "You don't have to fight them alone. If it comes to anything serious, I'll stand beside you." I didn't answer. My thoughts were already spinning, not with legal strategies, but with grief. How far were they willing to go to avoid saying, "We're sorry"? Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked tired, older somehow, but not broken. I wasn't the same woman who begged for her children's love. I had changed, hardened maybe, but also grown. Still, the sadness crept in like a slow tide. I wondered what my grandchildren were being told. Were Sarah and Daniel painting me as the crazy, controlling mother? Would those little ones grow up thinking their grandma disappeared out of bitterness? The thought crushed me. So I wrote again. This time, to the grandchildren I barely knew. "If one day you wonder who I was, know this. I loved you before you had names. I loved you before you existed. And if I'm not in your life, it's not because I stopped loving. It's because the people who brought you into the world forgot what love really looks like." I didn't know if they'd ever read those words, but it mattered to me that they were written, that some version of me, a real one, might survive the stories being twisted behind my back. I folded the letter, placed it next to the one I had written to Sarah and Daniel, and locked the drawer. That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't dream of being invisible in their home. I dreamed of walking through a house filled with sunlight, my own laughter echoing off the walls and no one there to silence it. It was a rainy Sunday when the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone. Claire had just visited the day before, and I hadn't spoken to anyone else in weeks. I hesitated for a moment before opening the door. It was Sarah, standing on my porch in a navy coat soaked at the shoulders, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She looked older, not just tired, but worn, like something inside her had cracked. I didn't say a word. I simply stepped aside and let her in. She stood awkwardly in the foyer, not taking off her coat, not meeting my eyes. The last time we'd been in the same room, she was barely 25. That had been nearly 6 years ago. She hadn't even called when I turned 60. "I'm not here to fight," she said finally. I need to understand." I nodded slowly. "Understand what?" She sighed, wrapping her arms around herself. "Why you did it. Why you gave us the house and then took it back." I took a breath. "I never took it back, Sarah. I protected it. I protected myself." "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "Daniel, he was angry that day. He didn't mean it." I raised my eyebrows. "Didn't mean what he said, or didn't mean for me to believe it?" She flinched. "Words have weight," I said softly, "especially when they come from your children." We sat at the kitchen table, the rain tapping softly on the windows. She looked around like she was seeing the house for the first time. "I was scared," she admitted. "You paying off the mortgage, it made me feel small, like I couldn't stand on my own." I looked at her, truly looked at her. "Then you should have said that. Not pretended I didn't exist after you got what you needed." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't know how. I think part of me resented you for always being the one who fixed everything." That hit differently. "I didn't fix it to control you," I said. "I did it because I couldn't bear to see you struggle, because that's what mothers do when they still believe they matter." She wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat. "I'm not asking for the house," she said. I needed to see you, to try and explain." I nodded. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. A crack in the wall. "I kept a letter," I told her. "One I wrote to you and Daniel. I never sent it." She looked up. "Can I read it?" I hesitated. "Maybe. One day." We sat there for a long time, saying nothing. The silence wasn't hostile this time, just fragile. When she finally stood to leave, she turned at the door. "Are we done?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but we're not where we were." She nodded, then stepped back into the rain, and I stood there in the quiet, wondering if forgiveness always had to start so small. After Sarah left, I didn't move for a long time. I just stood in the kitchen, staring at the chair where she'd sat, half expecting her to come back and say something more. But she didn't. The door stayed closed behind her, and the house felt like it exhaled all the air it had been holding. That night, I didn't write. I just pulled open the drawer with the 3 letters, Sarah's, mine to her and Daniel, and the one to my grandchildren, and placed them gently on the table. I reread mine, slowly, carefully, like I was hearing my own voice after a long silence. There was so much sorrow in those pages, so much love too. I could feel the woman who had written them, a version of me who still hoped her children might one day turn around and say, "I see you." "I'm sorry." I looked over at the fireplace. For a moment I considered burning them, letting the smoke carry away all the weight I'd been carrying, but I couldn't. They were proof that I had loved, proof that I had tried. Instead, I placed them back in the drawer, adding a small note on top. "If you ever wonder who I really was, start here." The next morning I went for a walk through the park near my house. The leaves had begun to fall, crunching under my feet. I watched families push strollers, couples sharing coffee from paper cups, children collecting acorns. Life moved on, quietly, without permission. At a bench near the pond, I sat and called Claire. I told her about Sarah's visit. Her silence on the other end was heavy but not judgmental. "She's trying," Claire said. "Is trying enough?" I asked. She hesitated. "Maybe not, but it's something, and something is more than nothing." I wanted to believe that, but part of me was still afraid of letting them back in, only to be cut open again. That evening I received a message from Daniel, just 3 words. "Can we talk?" No punctuation, no warmth, but not anger either. I stared at the message for a long time before setting the phone down. I didn't reply, not yet. Instead, I sat at the window watching the sun slip behind the buildings, bathing the sky in bruised orange and fading gold. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting. I was deciding, and that felt like power. I waited 3 days before responding to Daniel's message, not out of spite, but because I needed to be sure I wasn't responding out of guilt, habit, or loneliness. I needed to answer from a place of clarity. I wrote back, "If you're ready to talk with honesty, not accusation, I'm here." He replied almost immediately, "Tomorrow, your place?" And so, for the second time in a week, I prepared my home for a child who felt like a stranger. When Daniel arrived, he looked thinner, older. His eyes were tired, like he hadn't slept well in months. He hugged me, awkwardly, quickly, and sat at the table without a word. For a while, we just sat. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either, just full. "I didn't handle things right," he said finally. "I know that." I nodded. I didn't rush to ease his guilt. I let him feel it. "I think I wanted your help," he continued, "but I didn't want to feel like I owed you anything. And when you transferred the house, I panicked. It felt like a betrayal." That word stung. "A betrayal." He looked down. "I know, it wasn't, but it felt like you were saying we failed you." I took a breath. "You didn't fail me, Daniel. You hurt me. That's not the same thing." He nodded slowly. "I didn't know how to say thank you. I still don't. I was angry at myself for needing you, for not being able to give my kids what you gave me." And there it was, the heart of it. not control, not manipulation. Shame. Daniel, I said, softer now, I never gave you that house to shame you. I did it because I love you, because I thought if I took away the weight of the mortgage, you'd have more space to breathe, to live. He looked up, eyes glassy. And instead, we made you feel unwanted. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote something. I don't know if it's any good, but I needed to try. He slid it across the table. I didn't open it, not yet. I placed my hand on it and looked him in the eye. I don't need perfect, Daniel. I need honest. I need effort. I need you to see me as more than a bank account. I do, he said quietly. Now I do. He stayed for coffee. We didn't talk much after that, just sat, watched the rain and listened to the quiet hum of the world outside. But something had shifted, not repaired, not resolved, but shifted. Later that night after he left, I opened the letter. It was messy, scattered thoughts, apologies hidden between lines of regret, but it was real, and it was the first time in years I'd seen my son's heart without its armor. I cried, silent, private tears, not of sadness but of release. Maybe this wasn't the ending. Maybe it was the beginning of something slower, something fragile, but something. In the days following Daniel's visit, I felt a strange stillness settle over my home. It wasn't peace exactly, but something close, like the breath you take before you decide whether to cry or to let it go. I reread his letter twice, carefully this time. Each line revealed not only his guilt, but his blindness. He hadn't seen me, really seen me, for a long time. Maybe none of them had. I had become background music, comforting, familiar, unnoticed until it stopped playing. But something inside me had shifted too. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for their affection like a starving woman at a locked door. I had a voice again. I'd used it. And they heard me. Sarah texted a few days later. Daniel told me, I want to come by, if you're ready. I sat with that message longer than I expected. Part of me wanted to scream yes. Another part wanted to say nothing at all. I wasn't sure which one was fear and which one was wisdom. But eventually I replied, come Sunday, bring no expectations. Sunday came with a pale sun hanging low in the sky. Sarah arrived with her daughter, my granddaughter Anna. She was 6 now. Last time I saw her, she was barely walking. Anna held a small potted plant in her hands. This is for you, she said shyly, handing it to me. Mom said you like growing things. I smiled. I do. Thank you, sweetheart. Sarah stood behind her, visibly nervous. She looked around the room like she was bracing for impact. Hi, she said. Can we sit? We did. She didn't waste time. I read your letter, she said. Daniel showed it to me, and then I remembered the time you stayed up all night with me when I had the flu in middle school. I threw up all over the floor and you didn't even flinch. Just wrapped me in a blanket and said it was okay. Her voice cracked. I forgot. I don't know how I forgot. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. We got so caught up in being adults, in proving ourselves, that we forgot who taught us how to stand in the first place. I didn't interrupt. I was wrong, she continued, about the house, about what you meant to us. I didn't understand what you were trying to protect. I thought you were punishing us, but now I see you were saving what was left of you. That was it. That was the moment. She reached into her bag and handed me an envelope. I wrote something too. I wanted to say it in person, but I needed to get it right. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I looked at Anna, sitting quietly in the corner, coloring in a little notebook. She's beautiful, I said. She's stubborn, Sarah replied, smiling through tears. Like someone I know. We sat in the quiet again, but this time, it was full of something different, recognition. Before they left, Sarah hugged me. Not a quick, polite embrace. A real one. The kind you hold because you don't know how to let go. And I realized that maybe, just maybe, the hardest walls can crack with time. that even silence, when shared honestly, can lead to healing. When the door closed behind them, I held the plant Anna had given me. It was a little rosemary bush, the scent of memory and resilience. The rosemary plant sat in the center of my kitchen table, small and steady, its scent filling the room like something sacred. I watered it gently each morning, whispering thank yous, not just to the plant, but to whatever force had nudged my daughter to remember who I was. I still hadn't opened her letter, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to be ready. My heart had been broken so many times by their words, some spoken, some not, that I wanted to enter hers with the right kind of softness. No armor, no fear. That Sunday, I took the letter outside to the garden. The sky was overcast, the earth still damp from the night's rain. I sat on the same bench where I had cried weeks ago, wondering if my children had ever truly loved me. And then I opened her letter. It was messy, handwritten. A few crossed-out words and ink smudges where tears had fallen. She began with, "Mom, I forgot the sound of your laugh, and I think that's when I started losing pieces of myself." She spoke about her guilt, her pride, the way she had watched me give, and instead of feeling grateful, she felt ashamed that she couldn't measure up. She admitted she had resented the way I made things look easy, not realizing the cost I paid in silence and sacrifice. And then, near the end, she wrote something I will never forget. "You never needed us to be perfect. You only needed us to remember that you were human." I wept, not because it erased the pain, but because it acknowledged it. And that's all I had ever wanted. Later that day, I called Claire, told her everything. She was quiet for a while, then simply said, "Sometimes people come back, but they come back smaller, more careful, and you have to decide if your heart has room for that version of them." I did. I wasn't who I had been either. I was smaller in some ways, stronger in others, but yes, I had room. Daniel called that evening, not to talk about the house or money or even the past. He just asked how my garden was growing, and we spoke for almost an hour about the hydrangeas, the squirrels stealing tomatoes, and the smell of rosemary after rain. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was life. And sometimes, that's enough. In the weeks that followed, our conversations grew more frequent, though still cautious. Daniel called every few days, always beginning with something simple. A recipe he tried, a book recommendation, a question about the garden. Never about the house, never about the past. That silence between us, once sharp, had softened into something tentative and respectful. Sarah came by twice more, once with Anna and once alone. That second time, she stayed late. We talked into the night, sharing memories not with bitterness but with a strange tenderness, like two people rediscovering a language they had forgotten they spoke. She asked to see the drawer where I kept the letters. I hesitated, then opened it. She read hers, then Daniel's, then mine. When she got to the letter addressed to the grandchildren, her hands trembled. "You wrote this and before I came back?" I nodded. I needed them to know the truth, even if they never read it. She looked up, her eyes rimmed with guilt and something deeper. "Do you still believe all that?" I looked at her gently. "I still believe I was a good mother. I still believe I deserved better. But now, I also believe in second chances, quiet ones, earned ones." She folded the letter carefully and placed it back. "Then let's earn it." We began small rituals. Sarah and Anna started joining me for Sunday breakfast. Daniel fixed the broken garden gate without being asked. They never brought up the house transfer again, and I didn't offer it. Not yet. One morning, Daniel said something that stopped me mid-sip of coffee. "You know, Mom, I used to think your strength was just something you were born with, like it came naturally. But now I see it wasn't natural, it was work. Constant work." He paused. "And we made you do it alone." I didn't know what to say. But he didn't wait for a response. He just got up and started watering the plants. Forgiveness doesn't always come with a grand gesture. Sometimes it arrives as quiet hands pruning your roses, as a daughter folding napkins without being asked, as a granddaughter bringing you a drawing that says, "Grandma's garden," and you realize, Life doesn't return to what it was. It becomes something new, not perfect, but sacred in its own quiet way. It was spring when I decided to revisit the deed, not because I wanted to undo the past, but because I had changed, and so had they. I sat at the same kitchen table where months before I had made the choice to protect myself, not knowing if I'd ever be able to look at my children without resentment again. Now, as I held the folder in my hands, I wasn't angry. I was whole. I called Claire first. "I'm thinking about transferring it back," I said. There was a long pause. Then, "Because you trust them again?" I smiled. "Because I trust myself now, and because this time, it's a gift, not a plea." She didn't argue. She just said, "Then do it your way." A few weeks later, I invited Daniel and Sarah over. We sat outside in the garden, the rosemary blooming behind us, birds chirping like some scene from A Second Chance. "I've decided to put the house back in both of your names," I said simply. "Not because you've earned it or because I owe it, but because I'm ready." They both looked stunned. Daniel spoke first. "You don't have to do that." "I know," I replied, "but I want to, on one condition." They leaned in. "You never forget this moment. Not the house, not the hurt, but the rebuild, the work it took, for all of us, to get here." Sarah reached over and took my hand. "We won't forget. We'll remind each other." Anna came running from the yard just then, holding a tiny bouquet of dandelions. "These are for you, Grandma." I took them, smiling. "They're perfect." Later that night, after everyone left, I sat on the porch and watched the sun dip below the edge of the trees. I didn't feel like a victim anymore, or a forgotten mother, or a woman used for her money. I felt like Claire, a woman who had been wounded, who had built a wall, and who had learned when to open the gate again. I knew the pain wouldn't vanish. There would still be quiet days, heavy with memory, but now I had something stronger than memory, reconnection, and the knowledge that I didn't forgive because they begged. I forgave because I chose peace over pride, because love, even broken love, is still love when you decide to water it again. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you think about your own family, your own wounds, or your own journey toward forgiveness, leave a comment right now. Don't hold back. Your voice matters and your story could help someone else find peace. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story that speaks straight to the heart. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because we all know someone carrying a silent pain. And before you go, watch the next story that's about to appear on your screen. It might just be the one you needed today.